20s. You've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but just talk about where you were when you were younger with health and your belief around health, and then where you were prior to getting into companies that focused on health.
Empowering you organically, delivering content you trust with results you love.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Empowering You Organically. I'm your host, Jonathan Hunsaker, and I'm joined by my co-host, Terry Entrevenin.
Hey, everyone.
I think most of us are on a journey to health, whether that's a journey to losing weight, a journey to eating healthier, to exercising more, to whatever it may be. We're all on our journey. So I figured, why not share my journey, share my ups and downs and the good and the bad, and maybe even some tips along the way. And hopefully you find some value in it. So let's get started.
Yeah. So, I think you should share your story, just from the time you were little up until you were like in your 20s. You've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, but just talk about where you were when you were younger with health and your belief around health, and then where you were prior to getting into companies that focused on health.
Absolutely. So to start way back when, I'm the youngest of six. Raised by a single mother. My parents got divorced when I was about 6 years old. And at about the age of 13, 14, I think my mom was pretty much done raising kids at the time. So it's when I got introduced to the real world and went out and got a job and had to really provide a lot for myself. Throughout all that, health-wise, I was not the healthiest throughout my teenage years. I remember I was a door-to-door salesman in Baltimore, Maryland, selling the Baltimore Sun door-to-door. And they would pick us up after school and we would stop at a convenience store. And that would be where I picked up dinner. So it would usually be some Hostess cupcakes and probably a Dr. Pepper and something else. We go out, we knock doors till 7 or 8 at night. They drop me off at home and I'd get up the next morning, go to school, go knock doors, be home at 8 o'clock. And so most of my food came from either the school lunch or came from the convenience store on the way to go knock doors. So I was a quote unquote husky kid. I wasn't quite the fat kid in school, but I certainly wasn't the skinny kid either. Had some extra jelly around the mid-waist. And so after high school, I actually dropped out of high school after my junior year, and I moved to Austin, Texas. My brother Michael was there doing a landscaping business, and I moved down there to start my own landscaping business. Always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, always fascinated with business. And in high school, I was smoking a lot of weed. I was doing other things that just weren't good for me. So I left and moved to Austin. And that was really the first time that I started getting healthy. My brother Michael and I would get up at 4:30 in the morning. We would go for a run down Martin Luther King. We would wake up at 4:30 or 5, get up, we'd go for a hard 2-mile run down the drag. We would come back. We lived across the street from a 7-Eleven. I'd get showered. I'd walk over to the 7-Eleven, smoke a cigarette, buy a chocolate power bar and a Dr. Pepper, and that was my breakfast. And then we would leave out and we'd go do landscaping for the day. And then every day at lunch, I had a McDonald's, at the time was a number 2. It was a quarter pounder with cheese, supersized with a Dr. Pepper. And I ate the same thing every single day.
Were you self-conscious when you were a little kid?
Absolutely.
About the weight?
Yeah, I always had my shirt on. I always wore my shirt at the swimming pool, at the beach. And yeah, I was always self-conscious.
I think most people are, that's a tough struggle. And then what was it? How did it change your thought process and how you felt about yourself when you started getting thin and fit?
It was an amazing reflection, no doubt about it. I remember when I first started running and we went to the Austin Community College little gym there with my brother, and they had a dip machine. And I could do one dip, right? And that works your pecs out. It's where you're kind of on parallel bars and you dip down as low as you can and then lift back up. And then a couple months later, I went back there, and this was after running and probably losing 20 pounds. I was probably 120 pounds, 125 pounds. And I did 35 dips. And I hadn't done anything but just lose some weight. Mm-hmm. And it was an amazing feeling, for sure, to feel like I could control my body. at the same time, I started doing rock climbing at an indoor gym. It's a place called Pseudo Rock in Austin. And I started climbing and was climbing without any ropes or anything. That was another amazing feeling. I mean, for once in my life, like I could really handle my body weight. And I could climb all over that gym. I could do 20 or 30 pull-ups with a minimal grip, hanging from chains. And my brother, my other brother, who also moved there, my oldest brother Michael was already there. Then my other older brother David was there. I moved there shortly after, and he'd call me Little Bruce Lee. Like I was ripped at the time. I was really in good shape. I still smoked, but in terms of physically and my appearance, I looked great and was in better shape than I'd ever been.
Yeah, and then at that point, from that point to when you got into the natural health space, just talk a little bit about your journey there and what happened.
So, and I have an older sister who's a Bikram yoga instructor. I have another older sister who's a massage therapist. So I've always heard about healthy lifestyles. And I think the first yoga class I ever did, my sister took me to, was a Bikram class. And I had no idea, didn't take an extra towel or water or anything. I don't know that I've been back to a yoga class since. And she'll tell you that she wishes that wasn't the first one that she took me to. So I've always kind of understood and heard about it, but I never really lived it myself. I left Austin. There were some just not good influences for me there. And I left Austin. I went to Utah. One of my brothers was living there at the time. And I went and I started lifting, started powerlifting, started being kind of that excuse for getting fat really quick. Then I followed it up with muscle. So I started getting into protein shakes and started taking glutamine and creatine and was powerlifting. And before you know it, I was leg pressing 1,300 pounds. And so I got big really quick. I was still fat, but at least I had some muscle now underneath of all of that. And I just started in internet marketing. Again, this is probably 12 years ago now, and was starting to really understand copywriting and Google Ads and building websites and all of that. And in that space, I had gotten into the personal development space, and that's who I was working a lot with, was on the personal development side. So when it came to business, I was always very confident, and I'm very confident in my mind and my brain, and I could make very tough decisions very quickly, very easily, and I got a lot of reward from that. So business was quote unquote relatively easy for me. I have a very high risk tolerance, so entrepreneurship was definitely right up my alley. But where I always struggled was with my body and my health and my self-confidence in myself. I didn't, I just didn't have a whole lot of confidence at all when it came to my body. And I didn't have a good positive self-reflection of myself when I looked in the mirror. Now, business, on the other hand, was different. So I say all that to say, I was still enjoying alcohol 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week. I wasn't out there getting blasted. I wasn't waking up drinking it, but I would have a few glasses of wine every night to quote unquote relax. And that happened for several years. And listen, I was there during when The Secret came out, The Secret movie and the Law of Attraction. I was doing a lot of marketing around that with other people, and I was doing marketing around life coaching programs. So I really understood personal development. I really understood the power of thoughts and the power of thinking and just your whole mindset and how your thoughts turn into actions, which turn into reality and all of that. So I was very well versed in all of that. But I still wasn't taking control of myself physically and my body and my health. So at this time, I moved back to Austin. I was dating a massage therapist and decided to move down to Panama. I was at a phase, I was like, let's get out of the US, let's go travel. All I need is the internet to work from. We moved down to Panama. I had a buddy that was living down doing internet marketing in Panama City. We went and lived down there on the Pacific coast in a place called San Carlos for about a year. Then I discovered Bocas del Toro, which is an island on the Caribbean side. Moved out to Bocas and lived in a little shack built over the water. It was beautiful, right over top of the Caribbean. But I was getting fatter, right? Every night was Friday night. Right? Everybody that was out there was either backpackers traveling. In terms of work, I mean, I was doing some consulting. I was, again, really good at business, so I didn't have to work a whole lot of hours to make enough money to live. Didn't cost a whole lot to live there. So about that time, my brother-in-law, Mark, he had been telling me about Ty for a while, Ty Bollinger, saying, hey, you guys got to meet up. And this was a couple years before that, and I just kind of blew it off. He ended up introducing us, and Ty at the time was doing, he had written a book about cancer and how to beat it, alternative health and all of that. I think they wanted to publish the 6th edition of his book, Cancer Step Outside the Box. That didn't excite me much. I mean, there wasn't much around a 6th edition of a book that excited me. But the more that I talked to him, that's when I thought of the idea of, hey, let's do a docuseries. Let's send you all around the country. Let's interview a bunch of doctors about alternative medicine, alternative health, and let's give it away to the world for free. We did that, and it exploded. Right now, right around that same time that Ty and I partnered up, and Mark was part of the business as well. We were all 33% owners of the business, 33 and a third. We developed The Truth About Cancer. We did the we were started on the docuseries right at the same time as when I found out Shannon was pregnant with my oldest daughter, Olivia. And so this was February of 2014. And again, I mean, when I was introduced to Ty, I was still smoking. I was very out of shape, fat, unhealthy. And right at the same time, Shannon got pregnant with Olivia now. And I knew something had to change, right? And the biggest motivator was my daughter. I was not going to be a fat dad. I was not going to be a dad that sat on the couch and watched his kid run around but couldn't get off the couch and do anything. And then on top of that, now I've started a company called The Truth About Cancer, right? And I'm running all of the business around The Truth About Cancer. I'm doing all of the marketing around The Truth About Cancer and really driving that whole ship. Well, now I can't be a hypocrite either. So there were these two things that really just hit at the same time. It was like, it is time to get your shit together, right? And it's time to get healthy. And I did.
How much do you think you learned, like, in the time span of, like, when you learned about The Truth About Cancer and then released the series? Like, do you feel like you just had information overload about health and how you could change your life?
I really didn't. The first series we filmed and we released in May 2014, and I was still smoking. I had tried quitting smoking a couple times, but I was working. At this point, like, I was working to get this information out to the world, so I'm going day and night marketing. I'm not even watching the content as much as I was watching the content and learning it, but I wasn't implementing it. Yeah. It was a matter of how do we put this together? How do we reach a large amount of people? Yeah. Right? And so that was the focus. Right after that first airing of the docuseries is when I took a breath and it was like, yes, this is amazing and it's going to change the world, and I have to change me too. Mm-hmm. And I was making attempts there at the beginning of the year. It was July, I think, 14th or 15th that I smoked my last cigarette, got really clear. I read about it online. The best way to quit is cold turkey. And I believe that wholeheartedly. The best way to quit anything is cold turkey. With the caveat, depending on how heavy of a drinker you are, or if you're an alcoholic, I mean, you can definitely have some health risks there. Quitting certain pharmaceuticals, there's definitely health risks. So shortly after that, in August, September, my lungs weren't healing. I was starting to get a little bit concerned after, we were just now making the second docuseries, and I was learning all about the ketogenic diet, was learning about how it's an anti-cancer diet. I was still overweight, 260 some pounds. I also knew that when I was making this change, I've known better. I've known that you don't change it all at once. It doesn't work. So step one was quitting smoking and quitting the drinking. And that once I quit that, then I could move on to step two, which may be tackling my eating. And then step three, maybe adding exercise in. So I did that. Around September, I started the ketogenic diet, and my daughter was born on October 7th. I think I started the ketogenic diet just a little bit before then, and I started seeing phenomenal results. I started having more energy. I started losing weight. And it worked for me. And sometimes when you're at that level, I know there's a lot of controversy around the keto diet. I'm not saying that I think keto is the best diet for the rest of your life, right? I think that it's very important to learn how to turn fat into fuel. But at that time, I was seeing results and I was losing weight. At the time, my daughter was born. We moved away from the island. There wasn't clean running water on the island and just wasn't the right place to raise her. So we moved to Boquete, Panama, up in the rainforest there in a nice little house. And I quickly went from 265 to like 225 and started walking in the mornings and started running some in the mornings. And everything started progressing. I think the real thing to understand here is it's not an overnight fix. It's not a one-time thing, right? It's a process. And it's understanding that if you try to fix everything at once, your chances of failure are extremely high. Whereas pick the biggest problem. So we're living in Boquete. I'm getting healthier. I wanted to move away from Panama. We went and looked down in southern Chile. Went down to Pucón, Chile. Pucon, beautiful little place. We lived at the base of an active volcano and was still, I was focused on being a dad. We launched more docuseries with The Truth About Cancer. It was getting healthier. Things were really going well. Unfortunately, things with Shannon and I were not as healthy. They were getting worse. She was pregnant with our second daughter. And being down in southern Chile just wasn't helping. It was harder being away from family, being away from friends, and the stress was starting to accumulate. So we moved back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But moving back to the States under the stress of a breakup, understand too, when I was living in Panama, there wasn't fast food. I mean, there's fast food in Panama City and over near San Carlos, there was fast food. But when we were on the island, there was no fast food. When we were in southern Chile, there was no fast food. It was all healthier food. It was all local food. It was, generally organic food. And coming back to the States, and while it's not an excuse, I definitely fell into that trap of the stress and then stress eating and stress drinking and all of that. And I went back up to about 245 pounds. That hurts you on a confidence level as well, right? You just made all of this great progress. Now you're up to 245. Instantly went back on keto, got my life better in shape, and got recommitted to what mattered to me, and that was my girls, and that's what meant to me more than anything in the world. My oldest daughter, Olivia, was 2 at the time. Ava was born. And it was time to get things back in check again. I went back to what I knew worked well for me, and that was keto. And through keto, I dropped back down to about 215. Was feeling good. Things are going well. I mean, we're probably talking, early 2017, mid 2017 at the time, and stayed around that weight. And again, I'm getting healthier. Now, let me back up a little bit because I've only talked about the personal stuff. When I was down in southern Chile, we had also launched Organixx, the supplement company. It was launched as Epigenetic Labs. We had so many people following us with The Truth About Cancer that wanted good supplements. I wanted good supplements. I was on a health journey as well, right? I was down in southern Chile. Things were going well. And so we started creating supplements that didn't exist before, like really high quality, organic sourced, good quality blends, because that's what people wanted. We knew what was really healing people, although I'm not making any claims that it was healing anybody, and I never would and never will. But we knew from a lot of the doctors that we interviewed, from a lot of the research that was being done, what ingredients, what minerals, what herbs, what spices, what mushrooms, what seeds were really making a difference. And so we started Epigenetic Labs at the time. 2017, we changed our name to Organixx to better reflect who we were, while I still believe wholeheartedly that you can change your epigenetic makeup through diet and exercise and things like that. Organixx was a more mainstream name that really reflected who we were and some of the things that we stood for. Our supplements were designed to help healthy inflammation levels and boost your immune system. And we had our great bone broth and detox. And so I'm taking all of that, but it wasn't changing my weight. I felt great. I wasn't smoking. I wasn't drinking. I felt healthy. I felt strong. And I was still wanting to drop those pounds off. So I went keto, lost the weight some more, and I'd go on and off keto. About early 2018 it was time to really separate. Well, we had a big company at the time that was TrueNorth Management, and everybody worked for TrueNorth Management, and TrueNorth Management provided services for Organixx, for the truth about cancer and the truth about vaccines. We were just too big. We needed to separate out the companies. We needed to separate the people that were working on the companies so that we could become a lot more efficient and effective at what we were doing. We started that process in spring of 2018. Around June of 2018, I got really clear that I was getting burned out. I'd been working 80 hours a week, running 3 massive companies. At the time, I say running, but you were the CEO as well. But I was still involved in everything and still working like crazy. I knew that for my health, we needed to separate the ownership of the companies as well. I just was not able to sustain myself in running all 3 companies. It was damaging my health even more. And at that time, I had gotten down to about 195. I was starting to run a little bit more in the mornings, was really feeling good. And, I've got to work on my stress management. How do I deal with stress? Because during the next few months were very stressful. And I naturally put weight back on again. I got up to about 220. And, until things kind of settled down there and we were able to fully separate out the companies and come to agreements and all of that, then it was time to recommit again to getting healthy. And it was time to recommit, and I started running again in the mornings. We got to, this was just 6 months ago, right? I started running again in the mornings, went back to Old Faithful, which was keto for me. And then I've learned a lot throughout this whole time period, right? So I'm kind of given the cliff notes of everything. Meanwhile, I've been learning tons about health, right? I've been learning all about, a lot more about mushrooms and bone broth and juicing. And I've done some 30-day juices, and I've done, some 7-day and 10-day juices and cleanses. Just recently, I've started playing with water fasting and extended water fasting, doing 100 plus hours of just straight water, and doing them while running in the morning. I just a month and a half ago had my biggest running week of 30 miles, and I did it while fasting, only having water. And so I say all that to say, I'm on a journey too, right? I'm on a journey to get healthier. We launched this podcast so that we could share what we've learned, but more importantly, share what other people have learned, right? We have guests on our podcast that are experts, right? Whether it's Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson when it comes to sugar addiction, whether it's John Easterling, I don't think his podcast is aired yet, right? When it comes to botanical foods and nutrients and using botanicals for healing. And we had John Malanka on talking about cannabis and talking about the benefits of cannabis. So I say all that to say, I'm on this journey right along with all of our listeners. I'm on this journey right along with you. When I talk about taking 7M Plus, the mushrooms for boosting your immune system or anti-aging, it's because I've researched it. We formulated a phenomenal product, and I'm taking it right along with you. Whether it's taking collagens to help, rebuild the glue in your body again. I just turned 40 last year, right? It's important for me. So I say all that, and I'm running now. I'm now training to run my first marathon. I turned 40 years old, October 27th of last year. I started running a little bit more, and I was like, hey, I'm going to do a 5K day challenge. I'm now down to 195 again. My goal by the time of running the marathon is 160. Now, it's not all about weight. I could get it. I might be 180 and be really healthy, but I like setting that stretch goal for myself. I think that I will be very lean at 155 to 160, and that's where I hope to be. And I'm going to keep exploring with different things and testing things out with my body, like doing water fasting, doing intermittent fasting, doing some juice cleanses, doing some different cleanses. That's my motivation. My motivation is my daughters. My motivation is myself and my health. And my other motivation is you listening, right? I refuse to be a hypocrite. I refuse to not practice what I preach. And so it's all in an effort to just get healthy. And I think most people on this planet today are on a journey. They have not reached their destination. And if you think you've reached your destination, that's just probably part of your learning process to realize you're still on a journey. And I hope to be inspiring on some level. I've been playing with doing daily vlogs after my runs for a few weeks now, but I'm not an in front of the camera guy. I've always been a behind the scenes guy.
So through your journey in health, what's been your biggest lesson and your biggest takeaway?
The biggest lesson and biggest takeaway, it's interesting because it's twofold. It is not taking on too much at once, but what you do decide to take it on in a big way. So for quitting smoking, right, it wasn't let's smoke 5 less cigarettes a day. And I was a smoker. I was smoking a pack and a half a day, right? It wasn't cutting down. My goal wasn't let's quit by the end of the year. It was to quit smoking right now and be done. And the goal was never to touch a cigarette again. Now, my goal at the time wasn't go to the gym every morning and lift weights and then run 2 miles after that and only eat organic I didn't stack myself because that was going to stack me for failure. I found what I felt was my biggest thing preventing me from being healthy, and that was smoking. Now, I did quit drinking with it because drinking was such a strong trigger. But you know what else was a strong trigger for me? Driving in the car. What else is a strong trigger for me? Talking on the phone. Well, what do I do running companies? I'm on the phone 8 hours a day talking to people. So smoking just helped, or stopping drinking just helped the evening triggers. You know, there's a lot you have to fight through. And it's the same thing now. For me right now, what's the biggest thing? I don't smoke. I don't drink very often at all. And I've actually made the commitment not to have a sip of any sort of alcohol till after my marathon. Not that it's a bad thing or negative thing or a trigger thing. It just, I know for my body isn't as healthy. My eating is fairly under control. I follow keto, a lot of times, and the rest of the time I still eat clean. But my big thing right now is my running. And so taking on running as the one thing that I want to focus on right now, and then setting my lofty goal of running a marathon in a short amount of time. That's what's worked for me. And it's worked for me for years. And again, I'm not saying I didn't have struggles along the way and fall off the wagon, but that's what's worked for me consistently.
Awesome. So, I mean, this has been amazing listening to your story today. I think that you've come a long way. I think that you've been through a lot. And I think coming into the opportunity with businesses where, you know, natural health was a huge part of the story. You know, it's changed a lot of people's lives, including ours. You know, you with your daughters and your life and getting healthier, and certainly a lot of people who have come into the companies and worked with the companies. And so I appreciate you sharing your story today. And I think a lot of people go through those ups and downs and struggles and back and forth, and health is, you know, a journey. I think that's the biggest takeaway from what you've shared today, that health is a journey and that we're all figuring out our groove, and it just takes time, and it takes finding the right pieces of the puzzle and putting them together. And that looks different at different times in our lives. And so definitely inspiring hearing your story. And I think, you know, you'll definitely inspire more people as you continue on your journey of health.
Thank you for that. Yeah, if I can just stress to those of you listening that are looking to make changes in your life, it's very easy to look at all of the bad things that are happening, quote unquote, or all of the things that you wish you could change at once. I wish I was skinnier. I wish I didn't drink. I wish I studied more. I wish I worked a better job. I wish I wish I slept more. I wish I was nicer. I mean, there's all these things, and especially when you're in not feeling healthy mode, right? To just pick the one. pick that one thing and focus on it and let that be your life for 90 days, right? They say habits are formed in 21 days. I think it takes a lot longer than that personally, especially if you've had a negative habit or negative self-talk or negative self-reflection. Find that one thing and just focus on that one thing. And if it's exercising, more exercise. And if you find that you're still eating more pizza and junk and things like that, that's fine. Tackle that the 90 days after you've taken on your exercise and you made exercise a routine. Because we live in a world right now where everybody wants instant gratification. Everybody wants a solution in a bottle. Everybody wants, this quick fix. And it's not. And if you get a quick fix, it's not going to last. It just won't. And whether I've learned this lesson through health, but I've really learned this lesson through business. When you go for the quick fix in business, it never lasts. It's a grind, right? To have a successful business, to be a successful entrepreneur, you grind it out. I ground it out for 20 years, right? Before having the success that I have right now. And even still, it's still a grind constantly to maintain any amount of success that you have. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to your health. Is find that one thing and get it good, grind it out, become good at exercising or whatever it is you want to do, and then next tackle your diet. Personally, I think diet's more important to tackle than exercise, so I want to make sure I put that caveat out there. I think that diet will have a bigger impact on your life and your mental health and all of that. So if you're going to tackle something first, tackle your diet for 90 days. Then the next 90 days, maybe it's exercise. Maybe the next 90 days after diet is learning how to de-stress. So maybe you tackle becoming good at meditation, something I would love to become good at. And so my one big takeaway for you is take it one thing at a time. And if you fall off the wagon, don't wait until January 1st to get back on it. Don't wait until your birthday to get back on it. Don't wait until Monday to get back on it. Just get back on it now. Right? Everybody does that. It's like, all right, well, it's Wednesday. You know what? I'm going to start my new diet on Monday. Well, what do? We eat like crap all the way through Sunday night. And then Monday morning, we decide to start our new diet. Well, Wednesday, we fall off our diet. It's like, you know what? I'm going to try again Monday. But then we eat like crap until Monday. And the problem is we think that we're going to go restrict ourselves. We're going to start doing this thing that that's going to keep us from being able to enjoy all this other fun stuff. And so we gorge. And during this process of trying to start a new diet or a new way of eating, whatever you want to call it, we actually gain weight because we're gorging for those 3 days before we start a new diet. Well, consider not waiting. Consider start today. Start right now. If you're listening to a podcast, you want to make a decision to quit smoking, quit right now. Don't wait until Monday. Don't wait until tomorrow. And yeah, I just think that I think that if you fall off the wagon, get right back on it. Only tackle one thing at a time. And over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years, you will develop healthy habits that will stick with you for the long run. And if you fall off like I did, you have a strong base to get back onto and continue on that journey.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you for sharing today. It's been amazing listening to your story.
Thank you very much. Hey, I'm going to give a quick plug to our podcast. If you like this podcast, give us a rating on iTunes. Leave us a written review. Obviously, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. EmpoweringYouOrganically.com is our podcast website. Watch all of our previous podcasts. Download any of the show notes. Check out any of our sources if we've talked about different studies or things like that, will be in those show notes. I will give a plug to our company, Organixx.com, Organixx.com. And especially, it's not the supplements, but our inspired health library. There is tons of videos, tons of articles, tons of content to help educate you on your journey to health. And my final plea will be, come on this journey with me. I would love if you tuned in every week to our podcast and learned right along with us. I'd love to hear from you a year from now and tell me about your journey to health. And hopefully my journey to health will have a different story to tell a year from now as well. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.